Listen as some students discuss a lecture that they heard recently in geography class. The lecture was on the petrified forest.
That was a fascinating lecture today, wasn't it?
What I understood of it was good, but I'm not sure I got it all.
That's why we're here. We need to go over our notes together and make sure that we all understand it.
Well, I hope that you got good notes, because I don't think that mine are complete.
Here are my notes from today's lecture on the petrified forest.
Yes, the petrified forest in the desert of the southwestern United States.
It's hard to believe that such a huge desert actually used to be a giant forest.
That's true. Today it's a vast desert full of dried-out trees. And all of these dried-out trees used to be part of a lush wooded area.
Those trees are not exactly dried out. They have actually turned to stone.
Turned to stone? When did that happen?
It was a process that occurred over millions of years. That was what the professor was describing on the timeline that she put on the board.
And that timeline is what we need to understand for the quiz on Friday. Did either of you get the timeline that the professor wrote on the board?
I got some of it, but I couldn't see all of the board completely.
Here's what I wrote in my notes. 175 million years ago, Arizona was part of a swamp-like floodplain that was covered with moisture-loving plants and with tall trees growing on the higher ground.
I remember hearing the professor describe that there were lots of floods during this period, and the floodwaters often knocked the trees over and caused the fallen trees to pile up.
Then, sometime around 136 million years ago, the floodplain sank, and a giant sea started to spread over much of North America.
What happened to the trees at this time?
Over the millions of years that the sea covered the area, vast amounts of mud, sand, and sedimentary rock settled on the trees. This continued until the next point on the timeline, about 36 million years ago.
That was when the land began rising.
It was then that the Sierra Nevadas and the Rocky Mountains were formed.
Right. It was at the same time. And some of the buried trees were pushed to the surface, and the area became the dried-out desert that it is today.
But the trees were no longer wood.
No. By that time, they had become petrified. That is, they had turned to stone.
Is there anything else? That's all the information I have in my notes.
Me too. That's all I've got.
And I understand this all much better. Now I'm ready for that quiz on Friday.
What are the students discussing? What is true about the petrified forest? What was true 175 million years ago about the area that the students are discussing? When were the Rocky Mountains formed? During which eras did the following geographical features exist in the area now covered by the petrified forest?